That's a lot to get through. Doing it right now, we're going to be joined by Timothy Hayfie, the former federal prosecutor and former lead investigator to the January 6th Select Committee. All right, let's go first, Tim, with the delay in Trump's January 6th case until after the next president is sworn in. Is that reasonable to you?
I don't know about reasonable, Alex, but it's inevitable given how long the appeal to the Supreme Court took to resolve the immunity case. I think the special counsel is trying to, once again, hasten the path to trial in that matter by filing a superseding indictment and arguing to Judge Chutkan that it complies with the Supreme Court immunity ruling, and therefore she ought to reschedule the case for trial as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the former president has an opportunity to say, no, the superseding indictment does not comport with the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, and that whatever Judge Chutkan rules could be appealed. So we're looking at another series of what are called interlocutory appeals, things that go to the appellate court before a case is ultimately tried and resolved. So we're into 2025, unfortunately, now, regardless.
Oh, okay, but let me drill down a little further with this one, because Trump's proposed delay, it came after the new superseding indictment filed by Jack Smith this week. Smith held fresh grand jury hearings and excluded references to government officials advising Trump leading up to January 6th. But then you have Trump's lawyers who are saying they are going to seek to get this indictment dismissed because former Vice President Mike Pence was mentioned to the grand jury. Does the immunity ruling mean evidence about Pence is off limits?
That's one of the precise questions before Judge Chutkan. The special counsel, in describing the interaction with the vice president, with Mike Pence, described him as the president of the Senate. The vice president is not only vice president in the executive branch, but he's president of the Senate, presides over that legislative body. So the special counsel's theory here, and this again will be resolved by Judge Chutkan, is that when President Trump is communicating with Vice President Pence, it's a presidential candidate talking to the president of the Senate, and therefore not within the president's official function and not immune from potential relevance in a criminal case.
Okay, thank you for clearing all that up. Let's talk about what also happened new this week. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson speaking out about that Supreme Court conservative majority granting Trump limited immunity. Let's watch that.
I was concerned about a system that appeared to provide immunity for one individual under one set of circumstances, when we have a criminal justice system that had ordinarily treated everyone the same.
Tim, do you agree? And do you think the immunity ruling will reduce the prospects of a conviction in this case?
I agree with Justice Jackson that everyone should be the same in the eyes of the law, that we should not have any case that directly bears upon just one person or is designed to facilitate or help one person. I don't know, though, Alex, that the ultimate result here will be changed very much by what the Supreme Court said. Again, they left a lot of room for unofficial conduct or even some official conduct to be prosecuted if that prosecution would not impair the functioning of the executive branch. That's a very vague standard that judges below will have to interpret. So I think what you've seen was the special counsel saying, all right, we have a couple of fewer cards perhaps in our hand, but we still have a winning hand. And that's what the superseding indictment reflects. All of this has to be adjudicated by Judge Chutkan. But ultimately, Alex, I think there's a good chance that enough of the case remains, enough evidence of a conspiracy of the 4 charged counts that the former president can be convicted even with some of those acts that were originally charged being immunized.
Okay. What about Trump's New Jersey club hosting that event? It's called the J6 Awards Gala. It's happening Thursday. His campaign says he's not attending, but what are your thoughts on a Trump property hosting an event to honor and celebrate those being prosecuted in connection with the Capitol attack?
Yeah, it is just another extension of his irresponsible rhetoric praising the rioters. I also think it practically hurts him in his criminal case. If he wants to distance himself from the actions, the violent actions of the rioters, while he's holding a fundraiser that raises money for their legal defense, it aligns him in terms of his intent, Alex, with their actions, which could be directly relevant evidence of his intent in the pending criminal cases. So it's it is not only morally wrong for him to be defending the actions of these people that have been convicted of crimes, some violent crimes and assaults on police officers, but it practically hurts his legal defense.
Okay. Tim Heaphy, it's always good to have you on the show, ironing these things out for us. We'll see you again soon.